What are you afraid of? Like what causes fear in you? Is it planes? Is it snakes? Is it snakes on a plane? Like what is it that truly causes you to be unsettled and afraid? Statistically, I bet I could guess. Statistically, the majority of people in our world are afraid of two things. One is public speaking, which makes no sense to me. I mean, you just get up there and say words. This is like the easiest thing ever. But no, I get it. So public speaking, that's one of them. But the other fear that almost every single human being on this planet of Earth has is the fear of death. Why is that? I mean, I get it. It seems so uncertain. Particularly if you don't have like any connection to faith. It's like, what happens after you die? It seems like death is the end of all possibilities. And I think that is what causes the fear into us. We think it's where all possibilities cease to be. And so we get paralyzed in life because we want to avoid death. I see people trying to distract from it. I see people trying to pretend like it's not coming. I see people trying to just busy their lives so they don't have to think about it. But the truth is, the death rate is still hovering right around 100%. And what is certain is that every single one of us is going to die. So why are we so afraid? I love words. And I don't know if you know this or not, but the suffix C-I-D-E, side, it means to kill. So like homicide is like how you would kill a person, or pesticides are used to kill pests, or if you kill a whole group of people, right, we call that genocide. I don't know if you knew the connection, but there's another word that has side as a suffix, to decide. When you decide, when you make a decision, you're killing off a possibility. Like if I make a decision to have peanut butter and jelly and not macaroni and cheese, then I'm killing off what that macaroni and cheese could taste like. I'm killing off what that macaroni and cheese could have been filling or not filling for me, because I have decided I'm going with peanut butter and jelly. And I think what happens is this. We realize that when we decide, we're killing off a potential path. And so many of us get paralyzed and we don't want to make any decisions in our life. That is the power of what Jesus did. The power of Easter is that Jesus came so we could have life eternal, but that we could have a better life now. Jesus came to address the issue of death, the side in our life. And so that is why what Jesus accomplished on the cross, to die and to resurrect, what it means for you and me is this, that we don't have to fear death. We don't have to fear any decision, because once we decide to follow Christ and we kill off everything else that is in our life and we follow after Jesus, then we can know that we're going to have the best life now and life to the full. That's what Jesus says. He says to follow him, he says all things are possible. I love the way he says it in the book of Matthew chapter 19. He puts it this way in verse 26. With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. And when Jesus says that, like he's not saying like all things are possible, like you could just go out and fly, or all things are possible, like you could just think of the winning lottery numbers. No, what Jesus is saying is like when you decide to follow him, all things are possible. It's possible for you to be fully known and fully loved. It's possible for you to have community that cares for you and looks in on you. It's possible for you to have a mindset of boldness and of hope. And it's possible for you to have the assurance of eternal salvation. It is possible through Christ. And so what Jesus wants you and I to do is to follow him. Follow him to death. Not being afraid of it, but knowing that there's a path through it. I love the Psalm 23. It says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. God says you will get through this if you go with me. And so Jesus gives us two verses to encourage us on this path. The first is in Luke chapter 9, verse 22. And Luke chapter 9, verse 22, Jesus says this. He says, talking about himself, he said, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. He must be killed and on the third day raised to life. Jesus says he's going to suffer. And if you're going to follow me, you have to be willing to follow me through suffering. That's what Peter says when he writes his letter in 1 Peter chapter 4. He says, "But rejoice in so much as you partake in the suffering of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed." Jesus says when he was on this earth, he suffered. And he says, I have to tell you all the truth. In this world, you will have trouble. In this world, if you're following me, there will be some suffering. Now, I know that's not the message that you want on an Easter morning, but I have to tell you the truth. If you're alive on this earth, you're going to suffer. Suffering comes for all of us. Nobody gets through this life unscathed. At some point, you will suffer. At some point, I have suffered. Suffering happens, but that does not mean that God is not real, and it does not mean that what Jesus did is not the right way. It just means suffering is a part of life. And honestly, that's why I call this church Agape City. That's why we chose this word agape. It's a Greek word that means unconditional love. And the phrase I heard was this, and it's so beautiful. It says, to be alive is to suffer. But the willingness to step into someone else's suffering, that is love. That is agape. And so what we're trying to do here at this church and in this community is realizing that suffering is a part of life, but no one has to suffer alone. That we have one another, and we will help each other through this life. And we can have assurance of that because Jesus showed us the way through the cross. Which brings us to the next verse that he says. Luke chapter 9, verse 23, literally the very next verse, Jesus says this. He says, whoever wants to be my disciple, if you want to follow me, he says you need to take up your cross daily. Take up your cross. Now, some of you maybe have a piece of jewelry around your neck that's a nice ornate cross, or maybe you have a ring that has a cross on it. For many of you, this idea of taking up your cross to follow Jesus, you're like, yes, I want to wear this symbol of the resurrection of Jesus Christ because I want to declare his victory. But what you have to realize is that when Jesus wrote that, a cross was not jewelry. When Jesus wrote that, a cross was the place where death was. It was like this. And what Jesus was saying is this: if you want to follow me, you have to be willing to step into death, into death itself. That while you are alive, you have to be willing to die to what is in you. And that's the question I want to have for you this Easter morning is, what would it look like for you to die to that person in the mirror in your hand? What in you do you need to allow to die? Maybe for some of you, you need to let your fear die, or your insecurity die. Or for some of you, it's your ego or your selfishness. All I know is this: to follow Christ to life means we have to be willing to go through death. And if we go through death, then we will join Jesus in his resurrection. But you can only resurrect something if it has first died. And so that is why we have to realize death is not something to fear. Death is the pathway to life and life to the full. And we can know that for sure because of the resurrection. I know that for sure, not just because the Bible says it. I know it as a pastor because I see it. I see so many people who die to the things in their lives, and I watch their lives become alive in a way like it never has before. In fact, I want to share one of those stories with you now. I want you to check out this story from my brother Josh.
My wife ended up just going to urgent care for some belly pain, and they ended up finding a tumor that was cancerous, so we ended up going to the U of M to see how bad it was, and the cancer had already spread throughout her entire body pretty much. When she ended up getting diagnosed with the colorectal cancer, they already gave us a deadline on a date, how long that she was supposed to live for, and that alone was really hard to take, that just right off the bat, getting that news, having the 2 children. And it was just 7 months after being diagnosed, she passed away. I knew I needed to stay strong and be there for my daughters. And I was, when they were awake, getting them off the bus, cooking them dinner, taking care of them, But all this stuff kind of just started piling up really, really fast after she passed away, and just starting to really stress me out. So after I would put the girls to bed, I started drinking very heavily, just by myself too, self-isolation. Smoking a lot of weed during the day, just numb my pain and feel like, that this didn't happen to me. This one day, I was walking out of my house onto the back deck, and I just felt God lift this weight off of my shoulders, and it was just just a feel of relief, just being lifted, Him telling me that He was there for me, and I didn't have to miss anybody, or didn't have to be missing anything, that He was there for me. And I still was just not believing it 100%, and still telling myself that I needed these, I guess it was just a crutch to try to make it through, and just to numb everything that I was feeling in my body. Finally, one morning when I was driving home, I just pulled in the driveway, and it was just the drinking just I just didn't even want to do it anymore. I don't know what came over me. It just had to be God telling me, you don't need this anymore. You don't have to try to fill that. And I stopped drinking completely. And then a couple months went by, and for some reason I justified it again to start drinking again. And I always felt like I was drinking to fill a spot, because I was missing something, and every time I missed her, I would drink more. I was praying for God's will a lot to be done in my life at this point in time, like a lot. It's been almost 4 months now. I haven't drank in almost 7 months, and it's really just, I just can't even believe it, that it's came to that, because I smoked for like 12 years, and I just never even told myself that I could quit that. Coming to Agape City, my daughters were coming with me. Obviously my mom, she's the one that was talking to me about it and having me start coming there. My children were involved in the children's ministry, and they were loving it. They were asking me like, "Hey Dad, can we help break down, or can we help set up with you?" And it's just like, they're into church so much that they want to help out afterwards, and they want to be there longer. They don't want to go home. They complain when we say we want to go home. It's like, "Oh, we want to still be here." Going there with the kids and my mom, we all got baptized as a family. That was so amazing and so awesome to me that, everybody was just on board for that, and that they just felt like that is something that they needed to do in their lives after coming there. That's just not, like the Holy Spirit was coming into our household and just loving on us and telling us, die to these old ways and be born again in just a new heart. And I felt that so much. You just feel more alive when you can just die to those old things. I want everybody to know that there is hope in Jesus so much, and He can fill you up. He's a Father that loves, and He's always going to be there for us.